Lonesome George was a male Pinta Island tortoise and the last known individual of the subspecies. In his last years, he was known as the rarest creature in the world. George served as a potent symbol for conservation efforts in the Galápagos Islands and throughout the world. Discovery: George was first seen on the island of Pinta on November 1, 1971 by Hungarian malacologist Jakub Zsef Vargvar paragraph LGYI. The island's vegetation had been devastated by introduced feral goats, and the indigenous CN. Abingdonii population had been reduced to a single individual. It is thought that he was named after a character played by American actor George Gobel. Relocated for his safety to the Charles Darwin Research Station on Santa Cruz Island, George was penned with 2 females of a different subspecies. Although eggs were produced, none hatched. The Pinta tortoise was pronounced functionally extinct as George was in captivity. Mating attempts. Over the decades, all attempts at mating Lonesome George had been unsuccessful, due to the lack of females of his own subspecies. This prompted researchers at the Darwin Station to offer a $10,000 reward for a suitable mate. Until January 2011, George was penned with 2 females of the subspecies Chelonoidis nigra Becky, in the hope his genotype would be retained in any resulting progeny. This subspecies was then thought to be genetically closest to George's. However, any potential offspring would have been intergrades, not purebreds of the Pinta subspecies. In July 2008, George mated with one of his female companions. 13 eggs were collected and placed in incubators. On November 11, 2008, the Charles Darwin Foundation reported 80% of the eggs showed weight loss characteristic of being inviable. By December 2008, the remaining eggs had failed to hatch and X-rays showed they were inviable. On July 23, 2009, exactly 1 year after announcing George had mated, the Galápagos National Park announced one of George's female companions had laid a second clutch of 5 eggs. The park authority expressed its hope for the second clutch of eggs, which it said were in perfect condition. The eggs were moved to an incubator, but on December 16, it was announced the incubation period had ended and the eggs were inviable. In November 1999, scientists reported Lonesome George was very closely related to tortoises from Aspar ± Ola Island and San Cristobal Island. On January 20, 2011, 2 individual Chelonoidis female partners were imported to the Charles Darwin Research Station, where George lived. Death: on June 24, 2012, at 8 a.m. local time, Edwin Noller, director of the Galápagos National Park, announced that Lonesome George had been found dead by his caretaker of 40 years, Fausto Lorena. Noller suspects that the cause of death was heart failure consistent with the end of the natural life cycle of a tortoise. A necropsy confirmed that he died of old age. Lonesome George was sent to the American Museum of Natural History in New York City to be preserved by taxidermists. After a short display at the museum, it was expected that Lonesome George would be returned to the Galápagos and will be displayed at the Charles Darwin Research Station on Santa Cruz Island for future generations to see. However, a dispute has broken out between an Ecuadorian ministry and the Galápagos Islands over where the preserved body of a Galápagos giant tortoise should be housed. The Ecuadorian government wants him to be shown in the capital Quito, but the Galápagos local mayor says Lonesome George was a symbol of the islands and should return home. Most sources state Lonesome George was more than 100 years old, though others such as David Attenborough said he was probably in his 80s or possibly even younger. Even 100 is not especially old for a Galápagos tortoise. Biological Conservation. In November 2012, in the journal Biological Conservation, researchers reported identifying 17 tortoises that are partially descended from the same species as Lonesome George, leading them to speculate that related purebred individuals of that species may still be alive. In popular culture, the Futurama episode Naturama features Lonesome Hubert, a character inspired by Lonesome George. There is a character in the Wild Thornberrys episode Two's Company called Lonesome Jake. This character is also a giant tortoise and is thought by other characters for the majority of the episode to be the last of his species. See also, The Life Cairn Mr. Turpin, References